Good evening and welcome to Knock LA's first virtual sheriff candidate forum. Bienvenidos al primer foro todo virtual de candidatos a sheriff de Knock LA. Si necesita una traducción al español, visite bit.ly/español foro. Para español, visite bit.ly para español foro. My name is Cerise Castle, writer of the 15-part series, A Tradition of Violence, the history of deputy gangs in the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. I will be your moderator tonight. Thank you for joining, and thank you to our co-hosts, Reform LA Jails, Dignity and Power Now, Justice LA, and Cancel the Contract Antelope Valley. Tonight, we will be asking questions of the candidates for the Los Angeles County Sheriff, who will appear on the June 7th primary ballot. These questions will cover over-policing, deputy gangs, and deputy misconduct. All candidates for sheriff were invited to this event. Robert Luna, Cecil Rambo, and Alex Villanueva declined to join this nonpartisan forum. Luna emailed today saying he had a scheduling conflict. Rambo did not give a reason for his absence. Current Sheriff Alex Villanueva declined participation via his campaign manager, Javier Gonzalez, saying, quote, "I think I am washing my hair all those days." We hope the missing candidates will join us for the 2 remaining forums in the series. Now, before we begin, we would like to prepare the audience for the forum they are about to watch with a short video about the Sheriff's Department. This information is being delivered by Terry Lovett, the mother of Jelani Lovett, who died while being held in solitary confinement at Men's Central Jail. The department stated he was not there for disciplinary reasons.
Hello, my name is Terry Lovett. I'm the mother of Jelani Lovett that was killed in LASD last year. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department is the largest law enforcement agency in the United States. LASD provides law enforcement services to 42 contact cities, 141 unincorporated communities, 216 facilities, hospitals and clinics located throughout the county, 9 community colleges, the Metropolitan Transit Authority, and 37 superior courts. The department has 18,000 employees. Of those, nearly 10,000 are sworn deputies. Including revenue, their budget is over $5.5 billion. In 2019, with overtime, benefits, and bonuses, the sheriff made over $412,000. According to the Office of Inspector General, there has been a dramatic increase in deputy violence. In 2021, LASD was responsible for 35 shootings, 11 of which were fatal. In 2017, before the current sheriff took office, there were 22 shootings. Throughout the month of March 2022, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department has already killed 5 people. Throughout its history, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department has had at least 19 deputy gangs working inside of its ranks. There's a history of documentation of deputy gangs, including the 1992 Colt Report, the 2012 Citizens Commission on Jail Violence Report, the Inspector General's analysis into the Banditos, Lola Law School's 50 Years of Deputy Gangs Report, Knock LA investigative series into deputy gangs, and most recently the 2021 RAIN study understanding subgroups. Members of or those seeking membership in deputy gangs have killed at least 19 people, all of whom were men of color. At least 4 of them were in the midst of a mental health crisis. Litigation related to these cases has cost the county at least $100 million over the past 30 years. The LA Times recently reported that the Office of Inspector General has so far identified 41 sheriff deputies who are part of the Banditos in East LA Station and the executioners in the Compton Station. While the Los Angeles County keeps a list of lawsuits that have been identified as related to deputy gangs. The first investigation into the issue was only announced last month by Sean Kennedy, chair of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Oversight Commission. Thank you for listening.
Throughout the night, we will precede some questions with other informational videos delivered by members of the community to help the audience better understand some of the questions that will be asked. Please be warned, we will be discussing deputy violence tonight. Candidates will be called on in a random order to deliver a candidate statement and answer questions. Before each question, we will alert the candidates how much time they have to answer. Our time checker will hold up signs when they have 15 seconds left and when time is up. Should our fact checker determine that a candidate has shared false or misleading information, we will attempt to provide the audience with factual information. Should a candidate not clearly answer a question, I will ask for clarity. Now we will begin opening statements. You will have 1 minute. First up, Matthew Rodriguez.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right, can you hear me now? All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I'm humbled and grateful to have the opportunity. I just want to tell everybody that I'm running for sheriff to assist in a lot of the problems that are occurring in this county, both skyrocketing crime, questions about what's occurring within the organization from a deputy gang perspective, from just an integrity perspective. And hopefully tonight I can set the record straight on things that need to be done within our organization and how we could bridge that gap between the community and the law enforcement officers that serve them. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm running for sheriff because I've never seen Los Angeles as divided as it is today. And I believe the sheriff of Los Angeles County needs to be a unifier, not a divider, somebody who instinctively looks for the redeemable values and qualities in every human being that they contact, regardless of the circumstances that they find themselves in. I believe that currently in Los Angeles, what we're experiencing is not only extremely divisive, but it precludes us from being able to provide true public safety because we've lost public trust. And as sheriff of Los Angeles County, I know that I will do what I've done throughout my career is bring people together so that we can properly keep Los Angeles safe and work with all those who want to come to the table.
Good evening. I'm Britta Steinbrenner. I just retired as a captain from the Sheriff's Department County Services Bureau. I had the largest command for a single captain, but I'm running because we have an engineless and a rudderless ship that we're in right now. No leadership, no vision. We lost our moral compass. And I really want to turn this department around, reform it, modernize it, combat crimes, deal with our deputy gangs, take a relationship and have a relationship with the Board of Supervisors, and reform and modernize our jails and have facilities that we can have the mentally ill and those that are suffering from similar illnesses. But those solutions and to fix the department have to come within. And I want to bridge the gap with law enforcement and the community. And I can be the change agent to make a difference because we've had 33 male sheriffs that had the opportunity to do so, and we're still waiting. So now is time to change, to have some history, and to put the Sheriff's Department back on the right track. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Buenas noches a todos. I am running for sheriff because I am invested right now and currently serving under the Sheriff's Department. I came from the community and also migrated over here to the United States and lived here in California in the Los Angeles area. And being part of the department and trying to bring change is now. and not being promised for the change to happen. I've been waiting for change these past 17 years, and I think that it's time for someone who is still invested in the sheriff's department to bring that change and not wait another 10 or 15 years for change to happen. So for someone coming from a large family and within the community and working with the community, I think I can bridge that gap and bring back the leadership that we need to bring back and the transparency that is needed in our communities, and also back into the police department as well. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm running here. I'm Eric Strong, running for sheriff, and where we are, we don't have to be. Our headlines are about deputy gangs, abuses in our jails, deputy misconduct, and poor relationships and name calling. And that's just not where we need to be right now. We need a sheriff that's going to bring a sense of decorum, that's going to bring community first, the essence of compassion, dignity, and respect for all. I was born and raised here in Los Angeles County. I've experienced the driving while black. I've experienced many of the things that many of our communities are crying out about, as many of my family members have done who've been incarcerated or suffered from addiction. And so I bring a 360-degree perspective because that personal experience combined with my 30 years of law enforcement over 3 different agencies, having worked just about all that there is to do in this career, I know what's broken on the inside and I know how to fix it. And I'm here to work with you and the community and put community first. Thank you.
Hello, my name is April Salcedo Hood, and I'm a candidate for LA County Sheriff. The reason I'm running is due to high crime in LA County. We are going through so much crime. Homicide rate is high. Violent crime is high. We must do something about it. We need to redirect the personnel that we currently have and put them in places to protect the public, those who have city contracts with the LA County Sheriff's Department, the unincorporated areas. We must work with the Homicide Detective Bureau to assist them to locate and arrest those who commit these violent acts, to bring justice to the families who have lost loved ones. Additionally, we have to rebuild relationships with the Office of Inspector, the Board of Supervisor, and civilian oversight, and most importantly, work with the community to build back trust. Thank you.
And thank you to all the candidates for your opening statements. We'll go on to the first question. Deputy gangs have been a long-standing crisis within the LASD. They have run unchecked for decades, with whistleblowers admitting that deputies have killed unarmed civilians to gain entry. And a recent RAND report study showed that most deputies do not even see deputy gangs as a problem and view their violent tactics against members of the community as admirable. Even LASD leadership has been tied to deputy gangs and an unwillingness to discipline gang-affiliated deputies for misconduct. The current sheriff has repeatedly changed his position on deputy gangs, between vowing to eradicate them, to denying their existence, and sending a cease and desist to the county to prevent the board from using the term deputy gangs. What is your plan to root out and prevent the further spread and entrenchment of deputy gangs? You will each have 1 minute.
Thank you. So if there's employee misconduct, we must investigate employee misconduct for what it is. If people are committing crimes, we must investigate them just as if we would investigate anyone else. No one is above the law, and we have to hold people accountable. And we have to do that in a timely fashion where if it's an administrative investigation, we do it and we use the timeline that's needed so that we can hold people accountable and we don't lose that time frame. Because the officers do have that 1-year statute where if we don't act and we know that they've committed some sort of misconduct, then they may not receive the disciplinary action that they should have. We also have to address the disciplinary matrix and revise it so that it's a fair process and everybody is treated fairly.
Excuse me.
Yes, thank you. First of all, we have to create the policies that put a permanent end to any secret societies in the Sheriff's Department, period, end of the story. And that has to be the most important issue starting on day one, because without addressing that issue, we're never going to gain public trust. Then we need to do the deep dive, and we have to get into what motivates and what causes rogue behaviors by some of our personnel. And my position would be, I want to create a blue ribbon committee that would consist of the district attorney's office, the public defender's office, stakeholders in the community, the sheriff's department itself, our employee unions, and come to the table and figure out what is the behavior and what causes this type of behavior, so that we put a permanent end to it, not just a policy solution that ends the tattoos, but actually deals with the problem.
Hi, yes. I do believe that there should be checks and balances. At the same time, we also have to make sure that when these allegations are conducted, that we do have a team that when we do investigate it, that we investigate it thoroughly, and that when these allegations are made, that we're directing it to the source of the issues, and that we're tackling those issues, and that if they do exist, we have to make sure that we eliminate any of those identifications or groups of identities of them forming and but it starts at the top. So we have to change that from the top, and even though we have to bring that down in order for us to change all of that, so we have to start everything anew, but also give the same rights and the timeline for deputy personnel in order for them to have a due process. But I do agree with Mr. Vera and regarding and having an overview with the DA and somebody also investigating it.
You know, the first thing we need to do is stop beating around the bush with it and call it what it is and acknowledge it. That's something that hasn't been done in this leadership, and it hasn't been done for decades. It's also the messaging. What causes these things, the root causes, is poor leadership. What causes poor leadership and lack of accountability, right? So in order to do this, again, I'm the only candidate that's actually investigated deputy gangs. I don't need another panel, a blue ribbon commission to know that they exist. We just need to take action. Number one is address those that we can. We have people that have been identified that are already part of these gangs. We need to utilize a disciplinary process to affect this. We need to move those that maybe are outside of our legislative purview out of assignments where they can continue to cause harm to the community. And the next thing we need to do is bring in some outside. I mean, OIG wants to do an investigation. Let's open up the files. Let's open up the doors. Let them do it. Let's bring in the DOJ, FBI, whatever it needs. That's what we need to do.
Thank you. So the Sheriff's Department is going to be known for their community policing, not their deputy gangs. And I'm going to be implementing the RAND survey, their recommendations, and Loyola Law School. I'm going to rebuild our problematic stations with negative histories, and they're going to be environmentally and community friendly. And you'll see a community center, you'll see athletic fields, you'll see after school programs. The deputies, I want to rotate their shifts every 3 to 5 years so they don't get too complacent. Improve supervisor accountability. Sergeants and lieutenants have to be involved. Captains have to be visual. They have to be involved with their communities, town hall meetings, with their business districts. Proactive training. It starts in the academy, and it has to be continuous throughout our careers. We're going to be monitoring the workplace, because anytime there's negative behavior, we have to address it immediately. Disciplinary action, it's going to be timely. It's not going to be drawn out, and we're going to address it. I'm going to be very transparent and open with it. And also, I want to change the investigative process. I want a civilian internal affairs
the 41 personnel members identified by the Inspector General as belonging to the Banditos and Executioners deputy gangs is warranted. Candidates will have 45 seconds to respond to this, and we will start with Carla Carranza. Carla? Oh, I'm so sorry. Please excuse me. I completely forgot Mr. Rodriguez. Matt, I'm so sorry. Can you answer our first question? I will repeat. What is your plan to root out and prevent the further spread and entrenchment of deputy gangs? My apologies.
Oh, no, no problem. First and foremost, I agree with your statement that this has been plaguing us for decades. And it's most unfortunate because, if we have 41 deputies that are identified, and this is what we're talking about, and this is what I'm seeing on the news, and this is the stigma of deputy sheriffs, this should not be outweighing the 10,000 that are out doing great work. So first and foremost, I will put a stop to this. As Britta said, we go to the academy on day one, and we tell the recruits, listen, we're not looking for followers, we're looking for leaders. The minute you put a tattoo on your leg, you've now branded yourself. You're going to be jeopardized in court. Your testimony, you're now a risk management liability. And anybody in the organization, 41 or beyond, that is acting outside of the scope of the policy, outside of the scope of the law, or is violating people's civil rights in any community, and especially communities of color where this historically has taken place, I'll be putting a stop to that as your new sheriff. Thank you.
And thank you about that. I will make sure that does not happen again. I will repeat our second question. Do you think terminating the 41 personnel members identified by the Inspector General as belonging to the Banditos and Executioners deputy gangs is warranted? I will give you 45 seconds to respond, and we will start.
If they've been identified and they've been through the process and everything, I believe that it's warranted, because that's the oath that we take, is to protect our communities, is not to belong to a gang. And I do not belong to a gang or anything. So that's a misrepresentation of everybody else, like how Matt Rodriguez have stated, of all of us who have been community policing and been involved, and also with the community, and trying to gain their trust, and working together with the community. I've been with the community for the last.
Thank you. So of the 41 individuals, each has to have its own due process. You have to follow the POBAR, which is the Police Officers Bill of Rights. So each case gets investigated, and then there's a decision maker that makes the decision on the level of discipline. Then after the discipline is given, there's a grievance process. After the grievance process, then the final say will be termination. You might have suspension days, but you can't just throw individuals away. You have to try to rehabilitate. And if these individuals are so far gone as part of the deputy gangs, then yes, termination is the answer, but you have to give everybody a due process. And once this is done, there has to be a lessons learned briefing. We have to take these situations and learn from them so that we get smarter for the next time around.
Well, branding oneself with a tattoo in itself is not enough to terminate somebody. They actually have a First Amendment right to wear a tattoo. But however, if it's determined that these 41 deputy sheriffs are conducting themselves outside of the scope of the Sheriff's Department policy, outside of the scope of the law, or if they're behaving in a gang-like manner that can be proven, which is consistent with the definition of a gang in state law, then absolutely they should be removed from the organization. But again, we got to get down to the root cause. We have to stop it before it occurs at the academy level, and put a stop to this deputy gang subgroup clique problem, which is costing us a lot of money and it's a distraction from what we really should be doing, and that's out keeping the community safe.
Yes, actually, I think Matt was right on point with what he just said. But the bottom line is, if we have any deputy sheriff, not just 41, any deputy sheriff is acting in a criminal manner, we can't afford to have criminal deputy sheriffs. And we can't afford, like Matt was saying earlier, have deputy sheriffs that are acting in manners that are inconsistent with our department policies and with what a peace officer truly is supposed to be in Los Angeles County. So although they have their due process, if someone is found to be engaged in this type of activity, then of course they need to be fired.
Yeah, you know, this is a very simple answer. The answer is yes. It does warrant terminating them. You know, as you said, Cerise, we've been talking about this for decades. It's been going on. There's no deputy out there that doesn't know that this has been the thorn in the sheriff's department's side. And if they're still engaging in this activity and they've been identified, of course, there is a due process, but does it warrant getting rid of them so that they can stop causing the public harm and so that they can stop damaging the reputation of all of the other good women and men that are doing good work? Absolutely.
Thank you. And that's a really great question. If deputies are committing crimes, then like anybody else, what would we do? We would arrest them. If deputies are committing misconduct, then they would be investigated. And what would we do? They would receive the appropriate disciplinary action up to including termination. If those events have already taken place and they've already received whatever it is that they received as far as disciplinary, then we cannot redo the same disciplinary or redo that specific investigation because we've already addressed that policy violation. So if they do redo it, okay. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I would work with nonprofit organizations to encourage people, if they have those tattoos, go get them removed.
We'll move on to question 3, and I will begin with a brief explanation for our audience. Chasing ink is a term used to describe the practice of pursuing membership in a deputy gang. The ink refers to the tattoos that deputy gang members receive at 998 parties. They are called 998 parties after the police code for deputy-involved shoes contain images of skulls and guns. Some tattoos allude to Nazi imagery. Anthony Vargas, an unarmed Latino 21-year-old, was murdered by deputies Nicolas Perez and Jonathan Rojas on August 12, 2018. These deputies were alleged to have been chasing ink for the Banditos deputy gang. Since the execution, deputies from the East LA station have harassed members of the Vargas family. They have detained them for no reason, parked manned sheriff's vehicles in front of their house, and trailed them in department vehicles when they leave home. They are not the only impacted family to experience this kind of behavior. What will you do to end deputy harassment of families and friends of community members that have been victims of deputy violence? You will each have 30 seconds to respond, starting with Matt Rodriguez. Matt?
I could tell you this: any kind of witness intimidation, victim intimidation, families of the victims, especially if something as traumatic as deadly use of force. That was absolutely zero tolerance under my leadership. I can't think of anything worse than deputies harassing family members after a traumatic incident. I'm not aware of those sorts of things, but if they occur, then yes, people need to be disciplined and or removed from the organization for that sort of conduct.
Thank you. So any loss of life is a loss, no matter who they are. Somebody loved them. And we have to treat people with respect, with empathy when they go through these situations. And so when I speak with the deputies and all personnel, I would let them know to be compassionate, show empathy, be respectful. Using force, specifically deadly force, is the last thing I believe anybody would want to do as a peace officer. So I would encourage people, first, use compassion, use your verbal skills, try to talk things down, work with the community. Thank you.
Yes. Any incident of witness or intimidation of family members ought to be and will be, under my administration, thoroughly investigated. How can you investigate that? Very simply. Our computers have MDCs. We know the location of where our deputies are at all times. We have body-worn cameras that will document that contact of whatever the alleged incident is. So we have the tools in place so that we could thoroughly investigate every single complaint and make sure that we act accordingly in dealing with it and preventing it.
So that type of behavior will not be tolerated on my shift or at any facility, and it will be investigated once a complaint is given. The unit commander is going to reach out to the family, and that's why community policing is so important. We need to have the deputies, the sergeants involved with the community, and then we have to learn from those situations and brief them. And those individuals that are responsible for it, once they're going to be removed from that area, they're going to be placed on a different shift, a different work assignment, so that they can't be out there. And I will go out there, my captain will go out there, but we have to re-engage the trust.
Sorry, I double clicked on it. If any intimidation everybody has said here of a victim, I don't have all the facts, just that it's in an allegation, but any type of harassment, it will not be tolerated. However, when my brother was in any type of activity, I know that LAPD was set up for any type of uh, uh, trying to get anything. However, I don't know the whole story, but accountability comes all around to our communities, all around to the families, all around to even our department. But I will make sure that it's not going to be for intimidation or harassment of any kind. But it has to be all.
Yeah, this is about as egregious and malicious and harmful to the public as lying on a report, making false arrests, or planting evidence. So policy has to be created that has teeth to it, that will say that this is not tolerable, and the only discipline for this will be discharge. We can't have this. I just recently spoke with many of the impacted families, and the harm that they're going through, the vulnerability that they have, then to be compounded by stuff like, harassment. It's just unacceptable.
Tamiko Tyler. Tamiko was beaten to death by deputies at the Pitchess Detention Center.
In 1963, the Supreme Court ruled in Brady versus Maryland that the defense has the right to examine all evidence that may be of an exculpatory nature. That means the prosecutor must disclose evidence or information that would prove the innocence of a defendant. This includes disclosing evidence affecting the creditability of deputies. Deputies whose creditability have come into question are placed on a so-called Brady's list. They're what lands a deputy on this list, but the criteria includes falsifying reports, lying under oath, coercing witnesses, tampering with evidence, and fabricating evidence.
Now for the question. Do you commit to making LASD's complete and unredacted Brady list publicly available so that the defense does not have to rely on prosecutors for this information? And how often will you update the list as sheriff? You'll have 45 seconds to answer this question, and we will start with Eli Vera. Eli?
That's a question that obviously any deputy that's on the Brady list, there has to be some level of transparency where the public defender's office is assured that they have that information and that information is not being withheld. So I would agree that there has to be a process in place that allows for the verifiable information that the public defender is getting all the information that's needed on deputies that are potentially on that Brady list across the board. And there should be consequences if that information is not given and the law is not followed.
I kind of have the same mindsetting as Mr. Vera here. It has to be confirmed regarding the Brady list, and if it is confirmed and is reliable the information, of course they have to be the consequences. I mean, any report that is being falsified in any manner or any shape or form that's going to affect the person, it will not be tolerated. Zero tolerance. There shouldn't be no reason for us to even try to lie in a report at any point. We get victims that may lie for out of fear or whatever the case may be, but that's why we're there to seek the truth for them and say the truth for them when they cannot. So zero tolerance on lying regarding on the reports.
So yes, I will release the Brady list because the defense does have the right to the evidence on deputies, including the Brady list. I would have a guideline, a policy in place so that we're consistent throughout the department. And I will tell you that it should be updated frequently. I would say weekly, but once I'm in office, I'll look at the different options, but I want to be precise and I want to be transparent.
Yes, my campaign is based upon the respect for the people, respect for law enforcement, and respect for the rule of law. I also speak a lot about transparency. So the rule of law states that we will release the Brady list, and I will release the Brady list under the rule of law. And I will update the list as people are added to it throughout the organization.
Yes, absolutely. I'll release the Brady list. Look, this thing has been going around, Brady versus Maryland, since like the early '60s. So it's not that difficult to figure out how to do it. And we have the capability and the personnel that, as a deputy or anybody in the organization qualifies, be it sergeant, lieutenant, qualifies for the Brady list, it can be updated immediately. I don't think we need to have a set time limit. It's just it'll be a living document.
Thank you. Yes, I will provide the Brady list. I believe the previous Sheriff McDonald, tried to provide the Brady list and was blocked by the union, I believe. I will provide the Brady list to public defenders so that they're aware, and they can provide the appropriate legal action that they need. Everybody has a right to representation. Everybody has a right to due process. And so I will provide the Brady list. Yes.
Our next question will be asked by April, the mother of Frederick Holder.
On June 23rd, 2021, Frederick Holder, an unarmed black man, was shot at 33 times by the Norwalk Sheriff's Department. They did not render aid, and they didn't do so until the site supervisor came on site. My question is, when will you direct your sheriffs to render aid after a deputy-involved shooting?
To reiterate the question, at what point following a deputy shooting will you direct deputies to render aid? We will have 60 seconds to answer. We will start with Eric.
Yeah, this is already established in policy. We need to render aid as soon as possible. There is no reason to allow somebody to sit there and suffer. We wouldn't want it to happen to our family members, and we should not do it to anybody else. Deputies are trained in first aid. They're giving the tools needed to render first aid. And it just comes down to a sense of compassion, empathy, and respect for human life and dignity. And I truly believe that, again, with these body cameras and all of the technology that's out there, we will be able to see firsthand when aid is actually rendered. And nothing short of respect and reverence for human life will be tolerated.
From my experience in patrol, we've always rendered aid immediately at any circumstances, especially victims who have been victims of a shooting, whether it's self-inflicted or gang on gang. But that will be always a factor that we will render aid when safe to do so for anyone. But it is immediately. It always has been immediately. And I've only experienced it doing it immediately.
Thank you. It's actually April Salcedo Hood. I have two last names. It's okay. April Salcedo Hood for sheriff. So it's immediately, it's as soon as it's safe, as soon as the scene is safe, you're going to go and help the person. You're going to call the fire department. You're going to get the help that you need to help this person stop bleeding or render CPR, whatever it may be. This is a life and we need to help people. That's what we're in the business of doing, providing public safety, helping the public.
Yes, well, everything starts with training, and I think it's very important that recruits in the academy and even deputies that are on duty understand the traumatic, feelings that people go through in a deadly force incident. Not only from the victim standpoint, the victim's family standpoint, but the deputies oftentimes are traumatized as well. So under my leadership, deputies will be taught about the sanctity of human life, to have reverence for human life, and they'll be given additional tools to prevent deadly force from occurring, less lethal tools in technology and everything on their belt. So, but as far as rendering aid after a deadly or after a shooting, a hit shooting, that will occur immediately per policy and per the law.
Any loss of life is tragic. And so if there's a shooting or any type of situation, my deputies are to render aid immediately. There's no excuse for not rendering aid. They have to make sure the situation is safe. But I will share with you, if I find out that aid has not been given, then that'll be followed up with discipline, because that's unacceptable in my book.
That reported on average 3 minutes and 40 seconds passed before aid was rendered. And that was during a review of 47 incidents in the last year. To close us out on this question, we will go to Eli.
Yes, I thought Eric and Matt were right on point with what they were discussing. But what I'd like to add is that one of the things that we need to start to change is at the training level in the academy and then throughout in patrol school and things of that nature. We need to train our deputies to transition immediately and as soon as safe to providing physical aid to somebody who's been shot, whether it's by somebody else or by a deputy sheriff. And that's a process that really has to be ingrained and trained into those deputies so they do it seamlessly and they recognize the different feelings they're going to go through and immediately transition from, I just was in a firefight, now I have to save this person's life, and I will save this person's life and do everything possible everything possible to save this person's life. But that requires much more training that I think we need to invest in our deputies to get them to respond in that manner.
Thank you. And now we are going to move on to the next question. There have been numerous accounts of deputies handcuffing grievously injured, non-responsive, or deceased victims of deputy violence. This was the case in the deputy killing of Paul Rea after shooting him in the neck. He was handcuffed by deputies. Will you end the practice of handcuffing grievously injured, non-responsive, or deceased victims of deputy violence? Yes or no only, please.
Yes, I mean, if there's deputy sheriffs there and they've determined, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Next, yes.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
The Office of the Inspector General was created in 2014 to provide independent and comprehensive oversight, monitoring of, and reporting about the Sheriff's Department and Probation Department, and serve as the investigative arm of the Los Angeles County's Sheriff Civilian Oversight Commission and Probation Oversight Commission. In September of 2021, 3 deputies from the Santa Clarita Station pointed their weapons at 3 teenagers at a bus stop who were briefly detained and then let go. One of the deputies pointed and cocked a rifle. The Office of the Inspector General released a report following the incident that says under current policy, deputies can point rifles at people without any apparent limitations and without requiring that they document such occurrences as use of force. The OIG investigators wrote that because LASD doesn't consider pointing a gun at someone a use of force, there's no process for reporting those incidents. The department learned of the incident because of social media. The deputies received no discipline. What are some changes you would make, if any, to the use of force policy, and how would you hold deputies accountable for violations? You have 90 seconds.
Yes. Well, there's multiple ways to monitor this. Part of what can be done with the technology that we currently have is that if deputies come upon a traffic stop and point their weapons, or you deploy a long gun or anything of that nature, because it's going to be captured in your body-worn camera, you can cross-reference why it is that on tag so-and-so, that's the call for service that you're documenting that particular stop, that you pointed a weapon at so-and-so. And you'll be able to go back and actually pull that video and see if there's anything of any concern whatsoever, because there's going to be times that you're going to pull a weapon on somebody that you perceive to be armed but wasn't. And so there should be some level of documentation to show it. And if you're just pulling a weapon for the sake of pulling a weapon on people that have no reason whatsoever for you to take that type of action, then obviously that's not just of concern, but that's a practice that cannot be allowed inside the organization. But once again, getting back to the technology that we have the ability to look at every one of these incidents individually and actually ascertain what occurred. And there should be a documentation and a clearance, and even further, if it's something more egregious, in a written report.
Thank you. So first and foremost, I want to review the force policy to make sure that it's clear and that we have full direction for the deputies. I also want to confer with the OIG. I want to confer with other agencies on their force policies to see that we're all in line with the same guidelines, because I want us to be the model station, the model department. But then I also want to make sure that we have more weapons training, because right now we don't. You have your academy training. We can sometimes get forgetful. These are refresher skills. But then I want to investigate that situation from start to finish and take that camera, the body worn camera video, because we all are issued body worn cameras now, and go through it and look at it and look at it. And do we need to do an investigation? Is there a policy violation? And then how can we do remedial training so that it doesn't happen again? But the thing about putting it and just kind of sweeping it under the carpet doesn't help. And the other thing is we have to do de-escalation training, because we forget it's a perishable skill, but we constantly have to train. We constantly have to do scenarios. So the what if, so that you feel confident when you're out there, that you can work and do your job without any hesitation. And if you don't know and you're not sure, please call a supervisor over so that they can guide you. So really there's a lot of points that we need to tighten up, but the whole idea is training, supervision, and being out there, community policing, taking care of the public, and really assessing, because
You know, as a department force instructor, this is something that I taught and trained on for many years. And the problem is this: we don't have language and force training techniques that speak to non-escalation. Yes, we've had recent policy changes that speak to de-escalation, but we really need to look at non-escalation. When a deputy sheriff goes on a traffic stop and pulls their gun out, where are they going to go from there? You know, I have worked some of the most crime-ridden areas in the country, and back in the early 90s, and I was able to conduct traffic stops and deal with people and deal with you know, gang members and criminals, and I didn't have to pull my gun out and point it at them. So it comes down
My
to a sense of
camera is showing up.
confidence. It comes down to a sense of training. I'm sorry. Okay. So we need to enforce our force policies, and then also when we look at drawing a weapon on somebody, there's a way that we can collect data about that. As it was already stated, we have cameras, we have fields that we can create in our MDCs that we indicate what was done during a traffic stop, so that we can monitor these things and we can look at it and correct the behavior. But we have to get out of this mindset that our first option that we go to is to pull our gun out and point it at people. It's just not. It's not the way that we should be interacting, and it just seems to happen more often in our Black and brown communities, which is something that we're going to need to address as well.
Yeah, this is an interesting question, something I've never really given a lot of thought to, but I do understand that if you're on the receiving end of weapons being pointed at you, that it could be very traumatic. So I think that, we do need to adhere to the escalation of force, and something like a traffic stop and pointing a rifle at somebody without justification is problematic. So I would like to take a look at that policy and examine it. There are ways we could track it through the MDC or notifications. I know weapons get removed from, the holsters quite a bit. So that's definitely a policy that I think we need to take a look at, and it has to follow the protocols of escalation. Just pulling a rifle on somebody without cause is not acceptable. So yes, I'm willing to take a look at that policy, Cerise.
And I'm speaking from experience since I just got off from patrol and community policing in September of 2021. And I have drawn my weapon when I've done stops, due to the fact that it just depends on the time and day and also the area. And when me and my partner, if me and her are detaining people, we do it at gunpoint. And it's not because we're trying to profile anybody or anything like that. That's for my safety and their safety. Once we're able to identify the level of threat, then we holster our weapons and then we de-escalate from that. We're able to do that. Now, regarding a rifle, I don't have a rifle assigned to me, but maybe we can look over the policies of that and what got us to that point and what are the issues of it. I haven't really thought about that, but everybody's input on it. I mean, I would take a little bit of everything of that and review that. When you throw in juveniles, we don't know at that point that they're juveniles. And during the civil unrest and everything, we don't know what, especially on attacks on police officers, we don't know what we're faced on. We're not mind readers, and we can't determine that once we make contact with them and once we verbally communicate with them. So based on that experience that I've had for the past 17 years, I'm going to base it with my interaction and my experience and the training that I'm getting. But I do believe that training is very important, and we do need more of that.
Oh, can you hear me now? Okay. Okay, thank you. So I would implement random audits with the body worn camera. That way we can know whether or not people are providing professional public service to our communities that we serve. Secondly, I would provide simulations training for the field deputies. That way they can be able to be trained on different scenarios that they may encounter out in the field or at calls for service. Additionally, supervisors need to supervise. They need to go out. They need to go see what deputies are doing. If they're on a traffic stop, go and see what they're doing. Supervise. And also, when it comes to de-escalation, now I work with many people who have been convicted of serious and violent felons, and I work alone, and I go to homes alone. And one thing that I can tell you that resonates with people is respecting people. That goes a long way. And so I feel that depending on the person's confidence, based on having additional training, that will improve the person's abilities out in the field. So I'm a big advocate for training, but also ensuring that people are doing what they need to do. Thank you.
Going to do a quick follow-up. This is just another yes or no only, and you will answer in the same order. Do you commit to making the department's use of force policy available to the public on the LASD website? Starting again with Eli Vera. Eli, just yes or no?
Of course, yes.
Thank you. Next, Britta, yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you, Britta. Next, Eric Strong. Eric, yes or no?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Eric. Next, Matt Rodriguez, yes or no?
Yes.
Matt? Thank you, Matt. Next, Carla Carranza. Carla, yes or no? Carla?
Yes.
Thank you,
Yes.
Carla. And finally, April Saucedo Hood, yes or no? April?
Yes.
Thank you, April. Next question for the candidates. Deputies are routinely present during county autopsies for victims of deputy violence. This creates a situation where families of victims sometimes deem it necessary to pursue outside professionals to perform a private autopsy. In the case of Jamal Simpson, who was the second person killed by Deputy Gregory Van Hosen in an 18-month span, a private autopsy revealed inconsistencies with the autopsy performed by the county. Will you ban the presence of deputies during the performance of autopsies? Just a yes or no, please. Rodriguez is up first. Matt, yes or no?
No.
Next, we will go to Britta. Britta, yes or no? Britta?
No.
Thank you, Britta. Next, we'll go to Eric. Eric, yes or no? Eric?
That's a hard one, but no.
Thank you, Eric. Next, we will go to Eli Vera. Eli, yes or no, please? Eli?
No.
Thank you, Eli. Next, we'll go to April Saucedo Hood. Just yes or no, please. April?
No.
Thank you, April. And finally, to Carla Carranza. Just yes or no, please, Carla. Carla?
No. No.
Thank you. Can you please share why you deem it necessary for deputies to oversee autopsies, and what response do you have to the families that feel that it undermines the validity of the autopsy? You'll have 30 seconds to respond, and we will start with Matt. Matt, go ahead.
I don't have a lot of experience in this. I've never worked homicide bureau. My assumption would be that the homicide investigators are in there, and I would limit this to just homicide investigators, not any other deputy sheriffs. But my assumption is they're there for investigatory purposes. And, I think the further they are out of view and the further they are, outside of the doctors performing their work, the better. So the answer is I need them there for investigative purposes, but hopefully they'd be in the background.
Thank you, Matt. Next, we'll go to Britta Steinbrenner. Britta?
Thank you. So yes, and usually it's the homicide detective that's in there with the coroner when they're producing or performing the autopsy. And they're supposed to be to the side a little bit. They're in there to collect any evidence. They're there to collect any investigative information that they need for their reports. But I want to ensure that they're respectful and that they follow all the protocols once they're inside to respect the deceased that's in there.
Thank you, Britta. Next, we'll go to Eric Strong. Eric?
Yeah, this is absolutely for investigative purposes and chain of custody of evidence. It should be there just to find facts that lead to possible their investigation. And what we need is we need a coroner and deputies that are going to just do it right and that are going to be transparent and that are not going to create any type of intimidation factor or anything. And then we need to release those autopsies right away so that everybody gets to see the transparency and the fact that they were done correctly.
Thank you, Eric. Next, we'll go to Eli Vera. Eli?
Yes, Reese, it's part of the investigative process that's the reason that the homicide investigators are there. Like Eric stated earlier, they're collecting evidence. They're looking at the findings of the coroner, any inconsistencies that would cause them concerns. So it's there as part of the investigation, and that's what that's the purpose that they fulfill. But of course, it has to be done in a professional manner and as transparent as possible.
Thank you, Eli. Next, we'll go to April Saucedo Hood. April?
Thank you. It's important that they attend. As a previous state investigator, I have attended autopsies. So the pathologist is there, the lead investigator is there, and it's important to be able to speak with the pathologist regarding the circumstances surrounding the death, whether that's a suspicious death or whatever it may be, accidental. The pathologist is the person who does the determination of the cause of death. Also, regarding
Thank you, April.
coroner,
We're going to have to call it there for time. Next, we'll go to Carla Carranza to close us out. Carla?
Hi, yes. As they indicated, it's for investigative purposes. Homicide is the one who's dealing it. The person who's handling the report, for example, when I have handled it, is nobody who's been involved in regarding the shooting or anything like that, is independently in order for us to keep the chain of command and transparency in order for us to continue with the investigation and for us to provide that chain of command. So that is the only reason why we're there presently, in order for us to keep the report and the consistency, and we don't lose the focus and the target of the report. But homicide is there.
Thank you so much, Carla. Next question. Andres Guardado was an 18-year-old Latino security guard killed by deputies allegedly chasing ink for the executioner's deputy gang. The current sheriff put a security hold on the autopsy's release that was never lifted. Dr. Jonathan Lucas, the LA County medical examiner, released the autopsy along with a statement that said he believes the administration of justice and the public's right to know are not mutually exclusive ideals. When, if ever, do you believe placing a security hold on autopsies of victims of deputy violence is appropriate? You will have 45 seconds. Let's start with Carla Carranza. Carla?
The only time there should be any type of security hold is if the investigation hasn't been concluded, and this way it's not affecting the opinions of any of the people involved in the investigation. But we have to be transparent and also let due process continue. We can make those assumptions right away, just like we wouldn't make any assumptions of anybody who's been a victim. And I can totally understand that. When my brother was murdered, I would love that transparency to be there. Anyone that will be going through.
I think we lost Carla. I am going to come back to her to complete that answer. We're going to move on to Britta Steinbrenner. Britta, go ahead.
We have an obligation to do a thorough investigation, and once that investigation is completed in a timely manner, it needs to be released. The security hold, there has to be a justification as to why we're holding the information back, because it's the perception that we're trying to hide information. So all the parties involved would have to have the understanding that once the case is completed, we release it, and we release it in a very professional manner, and we have a process in how it's being released. And we don't do favors for one and not for the other. I do believe that we need to be consistent in all of our practices with the department, and who's ever handling the investigation is the one that should have the final say to say,
Thank
yes,
you,
we
Britta.
can release it. No, we can't.
Thank you, Britta. Next, we'll go to Eric Strong. Eric?
Yeah, the reality of it is no, it's not appropriate to put a security hold on a coroner's report. And what's the reason for it? Releasing a report does not change any of the facts. The investigators, and I've worked homicide cases, and the reality of it is that if there is a deputy involved shooting, that's all the more reason to be more transparent. We're having these conversations now because we haven't done what we're supposed to do. We haven't held true accountability. We haven't been transparent. So it's not appropriate to put a security hold on it. It doesn't change anything.
Thank you, Eric. We'll go now to April Saucedo Hood. April?
thank you. So I would follow what are the current best practices that other agencies are currently using regarding that specific question. I have never thought about it in that way. However, we are serving the public. The public has a right to know. Ultimately, they will know whether or not the timing and there's still an ongoing investigation, it just depends on the circumstances. But ultimately, the public will know. So, and then just for people to be aware of, usually coroner's reports do take a while, depending if there's toxicology lab work that they're waiting on. So just FYI for people who may not be aware of that.
Thank you, April. We'll go now to Matt Rodriguez. Matt?
Well, I think the only time that is appropriate to put a hold on a coroner's report is when all of the witnesses have not yet been interviewed. You don't want to release something prior to the witnesses being interviewed. And sometimes in homicide investigations, they are hard to track down and they do take time. But other than that, I think that they should be released in a timely manner to and open to public scrutiny.
Thank you, Matt. Now, Eli Vera. Eli?
Yes. Holds should only be used extremely sparingly, and it should be based on essentially what Matt just said, that you have ongoing investigations, witnesses that need to be interviewed. And you should be doing it in concurrence with the Inspector General that's going to be monitoring your operation to begin with from start to finish. So you have that level of transparency, and you don't hold on to that hold for an indefinite period of time. The second that you've completed that investigation, and it has to be in a timely manner, then you turn around and you release that hold. But it's a practice that is not used, should not be used often, and it should be sparingly and resolved very quickly.
Thank you, Eli. And let's go back to Carla Carranza to get her answer. Can my timekeeper give her 20 seconds to complete her answer, please? Thank you. Carla,
I'm sorry,
go
I
ahead.
thought my time was up. Well, like I said before, until the investigation has been concluded, the only time they should be sealed is when the investigation has been concluded. But then after that, be transparent and release it. But we do have witnesses that have not testified or have given their statements, and we don't want to taint that in any way in order for us to have a fair statement from everybody.
Thank you. All right, now for our next question. There have been numerous reports based on stop data collected by LASD that demonstrate LASD more frequently stops and subjects Latina and Black individuals, both in cars and on bicycles, for minor infractions and subjects them to more invasive searches and detentions than white people, despite being less likely to recover any contraband. Overall, 80% of LASD stops are for alleged traffic violations. Many view these types of stops and searches as pretextual, which primarily results in the harassment of Black and Latina Angelenos. Do you view these high numbers of traffic stops and the disparate policing of Latina and Black Angelenos as a problem? If so, how do you plan to address it? 1 minute answers, please, beginning with Eli Vera. Eli?
That's a great question. So once again, we have the ability now, like never before, to take a look at every one of our stops. And we can take each stop on an individual basis and evaluate from the beginning to the end if the actions are appropriate of those deputy sheriffs, if they are following the law, if there's something that's inconsistent or it's problematic. But this is a great subject that allows the department to be a lot more transparent on how we conduct business, because every one of those stops have to be documented, and there's going to be video to go along with every one of those stops. And that it gives us the opportunity to bring the community together. We can watch many of these stops and figure out, is there a problem here? If there is a problem, we need to address the problems. If we need to make adjustments to policies, we'll make adjustments to policies. If there is no issues with the particular stops, then there is none. But we don't have to guess anymore. We can actually see for ourselves and figure out what needs to be done.
Thank you, Eli. Next, we'll go to Matt Rodriguez. Matt?
Well, I'm going to qualify my statement by saying disparate treatment towards any community is unacceptable in my book. But, let's be realistic here. When you take a look at who is in the county jail, the vast majority of the people in the county jail are African American and Latinos. Most of the violent crime that is occurring in our communities, unfortunately, is happening in the Latino communities and in the African American communities. And that is exactly where our deputies are making stops. Now, if they're invalid stops or illegal stops or unethical stops, that's unacceptable. However, we have to be realistic about what's going on in our communities, and that's why my platform started in the African American communities, so we and in the Latino community, so we could break these cycles of violence that's occurring in the communities of color.
Thank you, Matt. Next, we'll go to Carla Carranza. Carla?
Okay, so if we're looking at where we're stopping, the majority of people in East LA is going to be Latino. So if I pull somebody over in a bike, it's going to be a Latino. If I go to Pico Rivera, Latino. If I go to Compton, it's going to be Black or Latino. If I go to South LA, Black or Latino. If I go to Santa Clarita, Palmdale, Lancaster is going to be mostly white. So if we're going to be realistic about this, like Matt Rodriguez has said, let's be realistic about it. And the majority in LA County is going to be Black or Latino. We're not profiling or anything like that. It's just in the communities when these infractions are done, we're going to do our due diligence. And it's now more transparent than ever. Our cameras are there. We indicate the reasons why we do the stop. Most of the time we recover guns, drugs, whatever the case may be, even stolen bikes from kids, from families. Bikes that are like $5,000. I've never seen a bike that costs $5,000, but I learned, but I never understood it. But this is the reality of it. But if we want to fool ourselves and say, you know, we're profiling and stopping Blacks or Latinos, come on, everybody. We need accountability all around. And I'm part of the community.
Thank you, Carla. Next, we will go to Britta Steinbrenner. Britta?
This is why community policing is so important. We need to have diversity in the stations that we have personnel assigned so that they can relate to the community members, to the business owners, to the visitors that drive through our communities. So if they're going to do a traffic stop, whether it's a bike stop or a traffic stop, there has to be a set procedure on how you address the public, and what you do for one, you do for both. And there's no racial profiling, there's no singling anybody out. But this starts with training, this starts with supervision, this starts with the sergeants going out there in the field being seen. And it starts with training, and we have to be consistent with what we're doing, because I'm not going to tolerate that. And we do have video. We do, I hope that the individual would call the station to file a complaint if any of that happens, because we are going to address that immediately. We're not going to sweep any of that under the rug. So again, we have to build transparency, we have to build credibility and trust with the community, and it will start with us.
Thank you, Britta. We're going to have to cut it there, unfortunately, to move on to our next candidate. That will be Eric Strong. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, this is definitely alarming. You know, I'm a Black man that lives in a Black and brown community, and I've been subjected to these traffic stops. And one thing I know in my 30 years of experience, having done thousands of stops, is you can pull up to somebody, ask for their driver's license and registration, walk back and write a ticket. You know, legislation says that traffic stops are inherently dangerous. If it's the traffic stop that's inherently dangerous, then we should do the exact same things that we do in Compton, that we do in Malibu, Lomita, or Cerritos. But data is showing, and as the unit commander of Audit and Accountability Bureau, we did audits, and these tens and tens of thousands of stops, we're not finding a whole lot of stuff on these things. We're just creating numbers. And as one of the candidates said, if we want to fool ourselves, and if we want to fool ourselves that this is not a problem, that that is not occurring, then we're going to keep having the same problems that we've been having all along. The reality of it is this. I have the ability to diffuse it. Many people don't. I get pulled over and asked to get out of the car when I know I didn't do anything wrong. It happens. I believe it. I know it. It needs to stop. We need policies.
Thank you, Eric. We're going to have to cut it there. It's for our next candidate, April Saucedo Hood. April, go ahead.
Thank you. That's why I'm a big fan of the random body-worn camera audits, seeing what people are doing, being able to audit. Did they do a traffic stop? Were they professional? Did they speak professionally to the people that they stopped? Were they cited? Were they not cited? Were they explained why they were stopped? Sometimes people like to know the reason why they were stopped. And if you explain that to them, then they understand, oh, yes, I forgot to signal, or, oh, I didn't realize I was going a little fast. I'm sorry. And that doesn't mean the officer or the deputy has to cite them or not. They can give them a verbal warning. And that interaction can turn from what could have potentially have been a negative interaction to a positive interaction. But it all is on how we interact with the public, how we treat each other. And we need to start treating each other with more respect and compassion and being kind. Kind people are my kind of people.
Thank you, April. And before we move on to our next question, I have a quick fact check. A report released by the Neighborhood Legal Services and Cal State Northridge points out that, quote, people of color in Lancaster and Palmdale are stopped by law enforcement at rates that exceed the surrounding areas. Black people in Lancaster account for over 33% of stops, despite being just 16% of the population in the Antelope Valley. Also in the Antelope Valley, Black and Latina individuals account for 79% of stops where officers point a gun. Now we're going to be moving on to our last set of questions. But before we do that, I have two videos for you. The first one is going to be from Giovanni Elliston, sister of Jamal Simpson, on POBRA, which we heard briefly mentioned by our candidates, also known as POBRA. And we will have another on qualified immunity by Khadijah Shabazz. She is the mother of Dana Mitchell Young Jr., aka Malik. Malik was killed by an LASD deputy who had already been involved in an excessive force lawsuit after shooting him in the back of the head and the penis for allegedly mistaking a COVID safety mask for a gun. They left his body behind an elementary school for 14 hours. We'll go to the video.
My name is Giovanni and I am from Los Angeles, California. PROBA, or the Public Safety Officers Procedural Bill of Rights Act, provides deputies extra protection that non-law enforcement officers don't have while facing criminal accusations. Deputies must be informed in advance that they will be interrogated, told what it'll be about, and told who will be doing the investigating. Deputies are allowed to bring their own recording device into the interrogation. They're also provided with any reports or complaints that aren't deemed confidential by the investigating agency, which is usually the agency they belong to. Statements made during these investigations are not admissible in following civil proceedings except in special cases. Investigators don't have to be told if the deputy is on the Brady list. PROBA matters because prosecutions of law enforcement are incredibly rare. Often the only investigations are when the department is investigating its own employees under this special set of laws. Thank you.
Qualified immunity is a legal doctrine created by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1982 that shields government officials from accountability when they violate constitutional rights. If a government employee damages your home, your car, or even your body, it prevents you from receiving compensation for the damage as long as the employee didn't violate clearly established law. It requires those suing to find previous case whether a court ruled that the government officials violated someone else's rights in almost exactly the same way in order to go to trial. Qualified immunity allows law enforcement officers to escape civil lawsuits involving violations of constitutional rights, even when their actions are intentionally egregious. Think about it.
Please answer the following questions with either a yes or no response. We will use the same order for this entire series, but I will prompt you so we don't have to keep track of that. Strong is going to kick us off. First question, do you think POBRA should be retracted? Just yes or no answers from the candidates, please. Eric.
No.
Carla.
No.
Britta.
No.
Matt. Matt, we can't hear you.
Okay, Cerise, was that part of the video, your question? Because I didn't hear the video. I can't see it.
Yes, and I will repeat the question for you. I'm sure you're familiar with POBRA as you are post-certified yourself.
Are you
think
talking about
POBRA?
POBAR, the Peace Officer Bill of Rights?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
The question is, do you think it should be retracted? Just yes or no,
No.
please. Thank you. And next, Eli Vera, yes or no only, please.
No.
April? Muted. Try again.
No.
Thank
Can you hear
you.
me?
Yes. Next question. Do you support the end of qualified immunity at the federal level? Eric Strong?
Yes.
Carla?
Yes, ma'am.
Britta?
No.
Matt?
No.
Eli?
No.
April? Try again.
I'm sorry, I'm having some trouble with my video. Can you repeat the question?
Of course. Do you support the end of qualified immunity at the
Oh.
federal level? Just yes or no.
No.
Thank you. Next question. Will you discipline deputies that hide their name and badge numbers while on duty? Just yes or no, please. First, Eric Strong.
Yes.
Next, Carla Carranza.
I'm sorry, ma'am. The audio went off. What was the question?
Oh, no worries. The question is, will you discipline deputies that hide their name and badge numbers while on duty? Yes or no?
No.
Next, Britta Steinbrenner, same question, yes or no, please.
No.
Matt Rodriguez, yes or no, please.
Yes.
Eli Vera
Yes.
and April Saucedo Hood.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, I'm trying to fix this.
Of course.
Computer.
No worries. And for the candidates, we will put them in the chat so you can see the questions as well, since we're running into some audio issues. The question is, will you discipline deputies that hide their name and badge number while on duty? Yes or no?
Yes, people need to be able to identify.
Just yes or no, please,
yes.
April. Sorry
Yes.
about that. Next question. Will you discipline deputies that carry challenge coins, wear challenge patches, or display any other unsanctioned memorabilia like thin blue line flags while on duty? Yes or no only, please. Eric Strong?
You said while on duty? Unsanctioned?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Next, Carla Carranza.
No.
Next, Britta Steinbrenner.
No.
Next, Matt Rodriguez.
Cerise, I'm going to challenge your question. Carrying a challenge coin is fine. Wearing something unauthorized.
Just yes
is
or
not
no,
fine.
please, Matt.
I'm
Just
gonna
yes or
have,
no, please.
Cerise, with all due respect, if the question's invalid, I'm gonna check you on it. It's an invalid question. You can carry a challenge coin in your pocket,
Okay,
but
I'm
you
going
don't
to
have to.
mute
You do
you
not.
just to
I'm just
stay in time with our
Very
form
good.
rules. It's a yes or no answer only. Thank you,
I
but
can't
I
answer it.
appreciate the
It's
thought.
invalid.
Next question. Will you institute a mechanism to lodge a complaint against a department that doesn't have to go through the department itself? First, Eric Strong.
I'm sorry, read it one more time.
Of course. Will you institute a mechanism to lodge a complaint against the department that doesn't have to go through the department itself?
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Next, Carla Carranza.
Yes.
Next, Britta Steinbrenner.
Yes.
Next, Matt Rodriguez. Matt?
Yes.
Thank you. And next, Eli Vera.
Yes, ma'am.
And finally, April Saucedo Hood.
Yes.
All right. And will you make complaints public? Eric Strong, yes or no?
Yes.
Next, Carla Carranza.
No.
Next, Britta Steinbrenner.
Yes.
Next, Matt Rodriguez,
Yes.
Eli Vera,
No.
April Saucedo Hood.
Yes.
All right. This question is very wordy. So candidates, it will be in the chat if you need to refer back to it. I will speak slowly and do my best to make sure you get the whole thing. Unlike other Los Angeles County department heads who can be removed for non-compliance, this is not the case for the sheriff. Community organizations have called for an amendment like the LA County Charter that does the following. First, create a procedure to allow the removal of the sheriff by a 4/5 vote of the Board of Supervisors for serious violations of the public trust, including serious crimes, unconstitutional conduct, and abuse of power. Second, reinforces the board's authority to create policies for LASD and delegate initial policy development to the Civilian Oversight Commission. Third, enshrine existing oversight by the Civilian Oversight Commission and Inspector General in the Charter, including subpoena power, independent counsel, and adequate funding. Do you support this amendment? Yes or no answer only, please. First, Eric Strong.
Yes.
Carla Carranza.
Can't talk.
Carla, can you hear us okay?
No, I can't.
Oh, okay. Did you not hear the question? It's in the chat. I can come back to you so you can get a chance to review it.
Okay, I'm reading it
We'll
right
move
now.
on to
I'm reading it
Britta.
right now.
Of course. Okay, I'll let you read and I'll circle back. Britta, yes or no?
So my answer is no, if I understand the question correctly, because I was trying to read it, but I will stay with
Okay.
no.
Okay, and just to clarify for the candidates, the question simplified is, do you support a charter amendment that would allow the removal of the sheriff? Moving on to Matt Rodriguez, yes or no?
No.
Next is Eli Vera, yes or no?
No.
April Saucedo Hood
No.
and Carla Carranza.
No.
Thank you. You will have 1 minute to answer our final question. As sheriff, who would you be accountable to? And in what ways would you make that accountability possible? First, Britta Steinbrenner. Britta?
So as sheriff, I'm accountable to the community because I'm there to protect and to serve them and provide an environment where everyone feels safe, secure, and welcomed. I'm also accountable to the Board of Supervisors, to the CEO, to the Inspector General. I look at the Civilian Oversight Commission as my checks and balances to keep me in check. But I'm also accountable to the department that I'm leading, to my employees, and I set the example. I am the role model. So although I'm an elected official, the residents voted me in, I owe it to them, and I will be transparent. I will be credible. I will bring back the trust that we have lost, because that is what being a leader is. You take accountability for the mistakes. You take accountability for the good and the bad of your department. And so therefore I'm accountable to everyone. And I'm also accountable to myself too, because I have to make sure that I'm doing the right thing at the right time. And if I don't know something and if I need some help, I will
Thank you,
go and
Britta.
seek
We're
out.
going to have to cut it off there just to hear from the other candidates. We'll move now to Matt Rodriguez. Matt, you have 1 minute.
Well, technically you're accountable to everyone in the community, everyone you serve, everyone who votes. You're also accountable to your employees, both the professional staff and the deputy sheriffs that work for you. You're accountable to everyone in the Civilian Oversight Commission, accountable in terms of cooperation to the board, to Inspector General, and everybody that we serve. So, but technically, you're accountable to the people who vote for you, and the people who have the right to vote the sheriffs in and sheriffs out. And that's why it's actually shameful that our sheriff is not here today to answer these questions. Thank you.
And thank you, Matt. We'll go now to Carla Carranza. Carla does have an engagement, so she will have to leave us after this answer. Carla, you will have 1 minute. Go ahead.
Most everyone kind of covered regarding being accountable, and I am accountable to the community. Those.
Uh-oh, it appears that we're having some trouble with your sound, Carla. Can you try it? Can you say something again? Carla, we're not able to hear you at this time. Still nothing, Carla. Do you want to try? I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you. We'll hear from another candidate while she tries to get her sound together. Eli, you have 1 minute.
Yes, you're accountable to everyone in Los Angeles County, period, end of story. Those that elect you and those that do not, that participate in the election process. You're accountable to other elected officials. You're accountable, to our oversight, our COC, our Inspector General. You're accountable to the members of the organization. The Sheriff of Los Angeles County is accountable to everyone. And the way that you are held accountable is by properly working with those in place to oversee the operation of the Sheriff's Department, the Inspector General and the COC, and cooperating with them in their oversight of the organization. You're accountable by bringing those to the table that have grievances against law enforcement, and you listen to their grievances and you figure out how you can improve and you can serve the communities better. So accountability to everyone and to myself.
Thank you, Eli. Carla, do you want to try again giving us your answer? You have a minute. I cannot. I don't know what that is. Carla, if you want to type your answer, since we're having some issues, I'm happy to write that or to speak it out for you. We can try again, go to another candidate and come back. April, you have 1 minute. Go ahead, April.
Thank you. So as sheriff, the sheriff is accountable to the people, first and foremost, the people of LA County. Additionally, the sheriff is accountable to the people that they lead, the deputies. There are many hardworking men and women who are deputies. And unfortunately, we get caught up with talking about those who do bad. We got to change that narrative. We got to work together to do change, positive change that will reduce crime, that will work with the Office of Inspector General, Board of Supervisors, civilian oversight, the public. And as sheriff, I'm going to go out and do random patrols to make sure that we are addressing the needs of the public, especially contract cities and the unincorporated areas that rely solely on the sheriff's department to provide public service, police services, law enforcement services. So we, as a sheriff, they're accountable to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to, Carla, do you want to try to hear you, if we can hear you one more time? Carla, 1 minute. Can we hear you? Carla? I'm not hearing, but she did leave a message in the chat, which I will read briefly. Carla says, I am accountable to the people, to the department, to the Board of Supervisors. And as sheriff, accountability is 100% for everyone. Next, we will go to Eric Strong. Eric, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, thank you, Cerise. Accountability has to be to every single person, voter, non-voter, supporter, non-supporter. And one of the things that I don't like hearing is separating, and we should not and cannot separate our accountability between our community and our department members. That is what creates the us versus them mentality. The accountability needs to be the same for everyone. And the way we do that is we hold ourselves accountable. We allow ourselves to be held accountable by the Board of Supervisors, by oversight, and by the citizens to our ethics, our laws, and doing what's right. That's where accountability lies, and that goes to every single person in this county, and even those that don't reside in this county, those that do business in the county and are transitory in the county. So it's got to be across the board with no separation to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you all to all the candidates for joining us tonight. And thank you to everyone at home watching NOC's first Sheriff Candidate Forum. Thank you. We'd like to thank our partners for this event, Reform LA Jails, Dignity and Power Now, Justice LA, and Cancel the Contract Antelope Valley. I'd also like to take a moment of appreciation for all of the impacted families that took time to inform us with the questions that we asked tonight and participated in the civic education components of this forum by contributing videos. We will be having another forum on April 25th in person, very exciting, with a virtual component for those who can't join us. It will be in the Antelope Valley, and we will be covering LASD contracts, budgets, and accountability. If you RSVP'd tonight, we will let you know about that event. But if you did not RSVP, please head over to bit.ly/NOCforum and sign up to receive details on the next forum. Please follow at knock.la on Instagram and Twitter to stay informed. I'm Cerise Castle. You can find me on Instagram. I'm at Your Majesty, and on Twitter at Cerise Castle. Thank you once again to the candidates and to our audience. Have a great night.